And there are problems with accumulated error within scan registrations. So I think that the survey control is a very important part of a lot of these technologies. Trial different layouts of ground control points, shooting those, reprocessing, and seeing what that data actually does elevation-wise, horizontally.
My journey into surveying actually started. I'm the son of a civil engineer, so I kind of grew up in the business. I was in artillery, which is all surveying with explosions.
I run the land surveying half of Nexus out of the office over in Central California.
I am a third generation land surveyor. When I started, the technology was a plumb bob and a steel chain.
I started surveying in 1999. I first used a scanner on a project in 2000.
Surveying is the art, science, and technology of making measurements on the Earth's surface. We have boundary components, and we have to interpret deeds, and we have to make decisions based on historical information.
Hey, if 2 or 3 inches is accurate enough for your project, hey, great, go for it. How do you know you're within 2 or 3 inches? How flat is my floor unless you've got that thing snapped down to control?
They designed ADA compliant sidewalks in a park and rebuilt a park, and there was vertical air everywhere.
Anytime we're talking about measurement, there must be a standard. If you're weighing something, you've got the gold bar, the gold standard. That becomes the plumb line, the true thing that you're measuring against. In our industry, surveying sets the standard.
So let's start with introductions. We'll just go down the line here. So, Mr. Shannon.
Okay. Well, first off, thank you, Matt, for bringing us together. This is an interesting, definitely eclectic group of professionals. It's been very enlightening for me. So, my name's Shannon Conaway. I'm the CEO of Conaway Geomatics. We're a land surveying and GIS firm in Southern California. My journey into surveying actually started. I'm the son of a civil engineer, so I kind of grew up in the business. I was in artillery, which is all surveying with explosions, and then I went to Fresno State, and been surveying obviously my entire professional career. So,
good morning. My name is Aaron Bird. I'm COO and Director of Surveying of Nexus 3D Consulting. So I run the land surveying half of Nexus out of the office over in Central California. Started surveying right out of high school, so it's all I've ever done, and love it.
Awesome.
My name is Jeff Voorhees. I am a third generation land surveyor, following in the footsteps of my father, my grandfather, and my great uncle. And I'm proud to have a fourth generation sitting back there representing the future of Voorhees and Voorhees. I started at about age 8. My father would take me out on weekends and summers, and when I started, the technology was a plumb bob and a steel chain. Yeah. And as a teenager, we got our first total station, and we've always been interested in adopting new technology to advance our skill set, to speed production, to improve accuracy. And scanning is just another step in that future of surveying. It's fascinating technology, so very excited to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Heath Hildebrand. My wife and I, my partner, own a small land surveying and engineering firm in Denver, Colorado. I started surveying in 1999. I first used a scanner on a project in 2000 on the transportation expansion and the South Valley Highway, would be Interstate I-25 or Interstate 25. We started a company about 6 years ago, and we have done fairly well over the years. We are really introducing new technologies due to the labor shortage, scanning. We just bought our first drone, just passed my 107. We're excited to be here. I'm excited to see a lot of new people in the industry and pushing faster, better ways to get our work completed.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'd like to just go through the list again real quick, and these can be brief answers, but out of the reality capture technologies that are out, which ones are you guys utilizing? Scanners, total stations, drones?
Yes. Yeah. Yes,
all of it, everybody?
Yeah. I can speak for Conaway Geomatics. So we're primarily a Trimble shop. So SX10, X7 scanners, and then drone technology. Pretty much every job, if there's a topo component to it, we're scanning it. We're using the imagery components of it, doing the best we can with the machine learning capabilities and integrating that with the deliverables to the clients.
Yeah, same with Nexus 3D Consulting. We're on the survey side. We use TopCon survey gear, so we're using the GPS, robotic total stations. We're using the Faro scanners. We're using the Leica scanners. We're flying the Inspire 2 drones. Pretty much every project these days is flown, no matter what, and supplemental scan data and conventional survey data is used for mapping purposes on just about every project these days.
Similar to Nexus, we are primarily a TopCon shop, but we integrated a Faro scanner about 6 years ago. We do drone surveying. I actually have a licensed drone pilot on staff, and he's flying a Phantom, DJI Phantom 4, I think. But he's licensed. I would love to fly it on more jobs, but we work in the LA metro area, and there are a ton of flight restrictions. Yeah. So there's just, frankly, a lot of places we cannot fly.
We're primarily a Trimble shop as well. With all this new technology and all these new softwares, one way for us to save costs is to try to stick with the similar software. Now, different instruments in the new formats that have come out and be able to work together, which has been great, but we've stuck with yellow. Big fan of green, but we run Trimble. We run a lot of Trimble scans. I tell my crews, you're not going to set up the SX10 without running a scan. It's just part of the workflow. It's part of our process when we're in the field running control or collecting data. We've purchased the Phantom 4 RTK, have yet to use it. In fact, I was trying to team with Nexus on a project and just found out that our one project area was in a special use near the DIA airport. So we're pushing it to another project. Hopefully we'll be able to get off the ground here shortly.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. And I think, industry-wide, I think a lot of, as reality capture has grown, I think there was this maybe assumption that surveyors have been slow to adopt, and I think to an extent that maybe was true. I think a lot are starting to see the values of the technology, and we can get into more discussions. A lot of people thinking of technology replacing jobs. If we are going to go fly a project and our field crews can't work, and I think we're starting to see that the technology doesn't replace jobs. It enhances the deliverables, the accuracies, the amount of data, and honestly, the amount of work that can be done in a short amount of time. I want to rewind back on the survey portion, though. Again, there are people who don't even know what surveying is. In kind of just a simple explanation, what is land surveying? What is it that you do?
So the best definition I have for it is that surveying is the art, science, and technology of making measurements on the Earth's surface, right? So if you think about the art part of it, we have boundary components, and we have to interpret deeds, and we have to make decisions based off historical information. The science, obviously, we're all around here. I mean, the mathematics that goes into it, and the technology, really everything we've seen here is the technology part of it, right? So what are we deploying the right instrument for the right job? That, in a nutshell, that's the way I would describe it.
Thank you. And we don't have to all answer that one. I think
No, that's
that was great.
Hey,
So
Matt, real quick, can I
go
jump
ahead.
in on that? So I like to, when I explain surveying and what I do, I like to break it into 3 components because that's how I kind of visualize it. Obviously, we collect data, we make maps, right? So I often tell people, I'm a map maker. The other thing we often do is lay out. We tell people where to put stuff. We tell people, these are the bounds, this is the acquisition you're gonna have, this is the easement, so forth, where are you gonna put a foundation, and then the third point, Shannon hit on with boundary, with bounds, and where our opinion of that boundary lies. So that if you keep it in those 3 simple categories, it kind of sums up our profession.
Yeah, thank you.
Could I give a 2-word answer?
Yes, and then I was going to ask you the next question. So.
Measurement expert.
Measurement expert.
Yeah.
So that actually rolls into what I was going to ask you is, I've seen, because I just get a lot of questions from people that are calling about which scanner, what technology, why do I need control? And some people assume, similar to scanning, the scanner itself is not hard to operate. You can get a scanner, you can set it up, you can press start, you can map. What is a potential concern from a surveyor's perspective as to, there are some people who are doing the same thing with survey control. So, a company that is not a survey company, that doesn't have that background, will go try to buy a total station so that they can do their own control for their, for whichever reality capture technology and do it internally. What do you think are some of the concerns of that approach?
Well, if you gave me the keys to a fighter jet and said, hey, go fly this thing, that would be really concerning. It's got way too much power that I don't know how to handle. And the scanner, it's an incredible tool, but all of a sudden you're dealing with a massive data set, and it's like all magic points. So the survey is super integral because it allows us to prove the data. It allows us to adjust and keep constraints on the error. As surveyors, we are very familiar with a term called error propagation and how quickly error can accumulate and exponentially expand. I kept hearing the term yesterday, drift. I thought that was something that happened in race cars, but the term drift, I mean, we as surveyors, we know that as error propagation. And so one of the things we do, one of our primary roles and functions as a surveyor is to constantly manage error and contain it and confine it and reduce it so that we can be confident of every survey point that gets measured or set in the field.
That is a great point. Thank you for putting that out there. So that being said, what is the importance of understanding and utilizing survey when also looking at these new technologies? Why would the control be important, or what's the potential issue of some of the technologies? And I know a lot of us have seen them firsthand. We've done drone flights where we had no control, and we analyzed that data. Then we trialed different layouts of ground control points, shooting those, reprocessing, and seeing what that data actually does elevation-wise, horizontally. Same with terrestrial scans. So what's some feedback there? And I guess I'll rephrase because I kept rambling. So what's the importance of the survey when it comes to utilizing these new technologies, and or maybe an example of where you've seen a difference in the outcome of some of the data using versus not?
I can answer first on this. We start talking about, as surveyors, and Shannon mentioned with historical data, we often like to put as surveyors things on a datum, on a grid, something known, some library that's already been predefined. And this is throughout history. Clark ellipsoid is 1886 when he first centered it in Kansas. And then all of a sudden we thought, oh, well, what if we want to use it for the military, which obviously the military has a big background in all of this technology, from scanning to global positioning systems, GNSS. And so I think it's a really big thing to have it on some kind of datum so we can have an historical factor. There's other people that were talking yesterday about having a digital twin or a library, and it's important to categorize that and have that data, that capture, whether it's a scan or orthomosaic photography, on a datum so that you can reference at later dates and compare it. I've used that comparison of photography with retracing trains, right? Where's that historic right-of-way for UP or BN? Another big thing is when we get into this working world, we're getting clients and we're flying something, scanning something, trying to give some kind of data feedback or base map, if you will, to our client. What is it going to be used for? So I just recently had a project where somebody flew it, captured it via drone, and they used VRS, which unfortunately has a vertical issue. It's a virtual GPS network, if you will. And they never asked the question, well, what is this going to be used for? Well, they designed ADA compliant sidewalks in a park and rebuilt a park. And there was vertical air everywhere. There's no way you could comply with the 2%, 1 in 48. So the questions weren't asked before you used the technology. Not that the drone couldn't do it, because in my test flights, I've come up to about 1 inch and 1/10, right? Unvegetated sites, hard surfaces. But done right with proper control and checks, you can get that every time. But the questions weren't asked, the procedures were blown, and then I had to come up and pick up the pieces to do layout and essentially redesign the whole site on the fly and double my price. Now I have a good working relationship with the city, County, Denver. This happens to be a park in their bounds, and with the contractors. They don't have a problem paying it, but it's 1 to 10. So every dollar you spend on the front end of design, you're going to save $10 on the back end. And I think people that are coming in this industry and don't necessarily get that training, that feedback from professional land surveyors, professional engineers, things of that nature. They don't ask the right questions, and then to deliver what's needed.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I would just say, you know, I'm a very neutral party. I'm not pointing out companies. I love all the hardware, all the software, but I think it's something that is undereducated and talked about is the importance of the survey. So many tools get pushed as, you don't need targets anymore. You can just fly and it's just gonna process and give you your volumes. And you can just walk around this building and scan the whole thing, or push a cart, or do terrestrial. All of those are gonna have the same issues on a certain scale of projects and certain types of projects without survey, period. We have done it with Leica systems, we've done it with Faro systems, we've done it with geoslams, we've done it with drones, and there are certain portions of data that are not going to be to a certain tolerance without constraining it with control. And we have trialed through, we have seen it, and I think it's just something that needs to be educated more so that there are projects that accuracy levels, maybe you have a foot tolerance, you're good with that, or a 6-inch tolerance, or maybe even an inch on a smaller project or something. But when you get into a lot of the projects that reality capture is being used on for construction, for design, for prefabrication of steel, there is a tighter tolerance need there, and then we end up hearing about problems. Things didn't fit. Yeah. Then there becomes legal issues. Then how do you prove a drone flight data set, and I heard a conversation about this yesterday, a drone flight volume calc of data without control to then verify that it was tied to, how do you prove the accuracy of that data? Because a lot of the scanning softwares will tell you things were registered right, but it knows it's certain scan to scan and different algorithms that it has, but it sometimes doesn't know the global error from one end of the building to the other, or from the first floor to the 10th floor. So getting an understanding of where survey is important, how it is to be integrated, I think is just a very important topic.
Hey, Matt, I'd like to make one point. I think for surveyors, the one thing that a lot of times we've been on the bleeding edge of these technologies. So we've developed a healthy level of skepticism when the new technology comes out, and just press a button, everything works out great. Because we're having to evaluate, what can be done with it, what are the tolerances. And I think the best way I can categorize it is that technology will never replace good practice and procedure, right? So that's something you have to be in mind everything you're approaching.
Well, if I could add a quick comment. Anytime we're talking about measurement, there must be a standard. If you're weighing something, you've got the gold bar, the gold standard, or whatever it is. That becomes the plumb line, the true thing that you're measuring against. In our industry, surveying sets the standard. Everything rises to that level. So in any project, when people are looking for the tightest possible accuracy, they call in the surveyors. So I think that's what we bring to the table is that standard of measurement. So and we've heard the question asked yesterday, or at what tolerance, what error are you willing to accept? If you're willing to accept several inches or a foot, probably don't need to call the surveyors. Go for it. But if you're on the projects that many of us work on, the tolerances are maybe 1/8 of an inch, a 1/4 inch on a bad day. You better have surveyors controlling that and proving it. And as we discussed last night a little bit, just amongst ourselves, much of our day in surveying is spent just checking, double checking, so that we can ensure that everything we do out there is to that tolerance level.
I'll add a little bit to that too, because you brought up the comment a minute ago about error propagation. And also the idea that, hey, if 2 or 3 inches is accurate enough for your project, hey, great, go for it. How do you know you're within 2 or 3 inches without some kind of control network or something? I'll give a quick example of a project that we worked on down in downtown LA on a parking structure. There's 3 floors of a concrete parking structure. Scanning is the only way to do this. It's just an awesome tool for that. But they wanted to know how thick the floor was in between parking structure floors and what kind of sag it was having, and they wanted that measured to within 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so the only way that we were able to do that is with extremely high precision control networks running differential level loops through the entire thing. So the only way for you to really have a warm, fuzzy feeling about the fact that you can sign your name to something that says, hey, this document, this cloud that I'm delivering to you is this accuracy. The only way to do that is with that high precision control network. It's impossible to do it any other way.
Yeah, and I think one caveat I would throw there is if it's a small area, the registration tightness of this room, of this building, you can get really tight tolerances. I think it does come into play as to what is your tolerance, what area are you in. The scanners are very accurate from their position. So if you set up a scan right here on stage and measure, you're going to have really tight tolerances on what you measure right here. But especially when you get into volume sizes is where I think it gets very critical. And again, we've seen it, we've trialed it, where as we register individual rooms throughout hundreds of thousands of square feet, before applying the control, you can see where the data sits. Applying the control, you see it shift inches, sometimes feet. And it's the same when it comes to elevation of data. You'll see bowing in your data if you don't have control on the end, because as you're registering, whether targeted or cloud, in my opinion, to a certain distance, you're going to see different things happen with your data. So what are some of the current issues you see with some of the new technologies, if you have any thoughts? There might not be any.
We have a lot of thoughts.
Careful, Shannon.
Exactly,
Careful.
yeah, we're surveyors, yeah. Yeah, the interesting thing is that the one thing with surveyors, it's hard to get any of us to agree, so we're going to coordinate what we're wearing. These guys are all wearing sports coats and a tie, and what the hell? Yeah, I think the challenge really is, it's really everything we're hearing here, right? The technology is coming at us pretty quickly. We've got a lot of AI, machine learning, a lot of things that are happening and developing very quickly. And understanding the right tool for the right job, how to implement it, that's the challenge. And probably the biggest challenge we still have is find qualified people, find people that are interested and educated and want to really engage in this profession. I think that's the biggest challenge that we face.
And I'd even ask kind of on that point is, while you're talking about the personnel shortage, I think we all feel that in a lot of these roles, in the scanning side as that grows, and even on the BIM, VDC, Revit side, I think surveying even is probably worse. The amount of people that are retiring in surveying, the amount of people that are entering into the actual survey profession is, I think, a pretty drastic percentage there. Would you give a little thought on that?
Yeah, it's been, I always go back to I read an article several years ago about, at least in the state of California, which is where I'm from, in California, land surveyors have been retiring or dying at a rate of about 150 per year for the last 35, 40 years. But they've only been licensing about 50 per year. So in a state with 30 plus million people, right now I think there's, around 3,000 practicing licensed surveyors, maybe, if that many?
There's not enough.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so
most of them moved here, by the way.
yeah, most of them now live in Idaho. But as far as the technology stuff goes, we have seen, most of us up here, I think, started back, like Jeff said, with steel tapes and plumb bobs measuring stuff, and thank God that Jeff is bringing up another generation, so I don't have another generation of land surveyors yet. But the technologies have changed so much. Going from the days where we used to have to traverse around a square mile section to now we just set a base unit up and just drive. It's just amazing. Scanners have just even added to that, and it's important to just know what tool to use when. The scanner is not the end-all be-all to the surveying profession in any way. Neither is the drone. So understanding when to use what tool, we look at all those things, scanners, drones, all of that new technology. We just look at it as it's just another tool in our toolbox on the truck, and we take it out when it's appropriate, and that's just how we have always viewed it.
And this is another question kind of on a basic explanation, again, for kind of those that don't even understand, why is the survey more accurate? for this example project, if we said we had a large building, we got 800 feet along the length, and the job is to scan the entire exterior of that building and maybe even run inside and do throughout the interior. Why is it that we would need survey, and why is it so more accurate? Can you just do a simple explanation on the process of how would you put the control within that project to make sure that those targets around the exterior or interior are tight, and what would your expectation on the accuracy of those targets being?
I mean, there's a lot. Go ahead.
Well, one thing that we know as surveyors, the fundamental building block for our accuracy is a closed polygon. The ability to start from one point, traverse hundreds, thousands of feet, maybe miles, and come back to the same beginning point. And when you can come back to the same point and hit it either right on or within a few hundredths of a foot, that is the proof that we did well all the way along at every intermediate traverse point. So any job, whether it's this hypothetical one or any survey, what we would do is do some kind of a traverse where we start at point A, then go to point B, point C, point D, point whatever, all the way back to point A, and check in. And if we get a misclosure, then we can do a network adjustment and tighten up all the points in between. And with the technology that we're using today in total stations, we've proven over and over again, it is so unbelievably tight. Every day of the week, we can traverse a city block, which might be 4,000 feet in total traverse length, and come back to within a quarter of an inch, horizontally and vertically, every time.
Can you do that with a scanner? No, I'm just kidding. Sorry. That is why we're talking about that.
I don't know. How would you know for sure whether you were?
I don't know. So I appreciate all the answers, and I would love to, those of you that do have questions and want to jump in, you can start heading over to the microphone over there. That's all my immediate questions. So first, as we get some questions heading over, I do want to ask, do you guys have anything specific on your mind that you would like to share or touch on?
Yeah, I have a quick thing, and with this technology and everybody that's maybe not in the surveying profession specifically, is it allowed the cost of all this stuff to come down so we can implement it. The biggest problem, a lot of the problems that we face as surveyors and providing services to our clients is that it's been hard to afford everything because we don't use it consistently. We have scanners, we have drones, we have robotic total stations, we have conventional total stations. We have GPS. The GPS world has changed dramatically, and so to keep all that stuff up to date, calibrated, people trained on how to use it day to day, training people how to protect it, because you drop a collector, you drop a GPS head, there's 10 to 20 grand you got to turn around and replace, and you're already behind on your project. So I do want to say that I appreciate the interest in this, because it's pretty neat, and then I like to say that some of this technology is starting to make survey sexy again, and people want to get into it. The younger generations are seeing this and saying, yes, this is really neat. However, we need to, hey, there's some things we need to learn and understand so that it works with all of us, and that you can have repeatable data time and time again.
Love it. And I know a couple of you may have something to say as well. I just wanted to circle back on one thing when we left off on talking about the hypothetical project with the targets around your building or through. I thought of it and I forgot to say it. So those points that would be shot, and we're talking about the importance of that control network and that accuracy, the scanning software has the ability to identify those targets that you shoot, and there's a reason. And they also have the ability to take the survey control file, directly dump it into the scan registration software, and utilize that to increase the accuracy of your data set. So the hardware and the software has the ability to incorporate the accuracies of the survey control. So I wanted to throw that point out there, because it's not like it's two separate things. It is built to work together. So I just wanted to throw that out while I thought of it. It's an important point. So I know we've got a question over here. So
one point I would make just real quick is that one thing about the integration of the survey control on your scan projects is that if any of you ever have a client ask you about can point cloud, the question of how accurate is this? The only way you're going to be able to answer that question realistically is to know by having some sort of survey network that has been done by a professional and you've registered to that network. There's no other way really for you to be able to say, hey, from one end of this building to the next on a 1 million square foot warehouse or something, how flat is my floor unless you've got that thing snapped down to control that cloud. So it's just something to think about.
Absolutely.
I think the one thing I have, Matt, is that we're not these little isolated pockets anymore. Pretty much all of our deliverables now are you have to deliver in state plane coordinates, geodetic coordinates. They want to be able to bring them into Google Earth. Everybody has these other applications, and so you're not just an isolated little entity building existing on its own. And really, kind of the theme of this whole discussion is how do you integrate it with all these other sources? How do you connect this building with the infrastructure around it and the building down the street? So yeah, that's a really important part of what we're doing.
Great. Let's go ahead and go over here to questions.
Yeah, Rob Myers, Entropy Group. I'm not a trained surveyor, I'm a trained attorney, but I've got a question about the error propagation that you speak about. You're talking about the gold standard and control points and so forth, but I haven't heard any reference to geodesy and how that relates to error propagation. Can you describe that?
I'm just going to say geodesy is beyond my pay grade. I know some of the guys here do work on a larger scale, so I'm going to defer.
Yeah, I kind of hit on it when I talked about making measurements on their surface, right? So the science part of that is geodesy, right? We have to take into account the size and shape of the Earth. When we're reducing our observations, depending on what we're delivering to our clients. So, state plane or when we talk about geodetic coordinates, right? That's in geodesy, and so we have to know where we're at. We have to know we're using the right plane. We need to know, when you're developing. One of the things that's really dangerous about state plane coordinates is when you talk about the notion of grid to ground. You really do need to understand what are you providing and how you're communicating that to the client. A lot of times our data gets ingested into other softwares, right? So it's very important that we give that right information so when it comes in, it's not shifted 3 feet, right? So hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Just definition of the standard that you're using needs to be stated clearly.
From an attorney.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Morning.
Morning.
Carlos Velasquez with EveryPoint. I'm curious how you guys see the future of surveying, say 10, 15, maybe it's 20 years. Now that these are becoming our capture devices as well, phones, all these different devices, they're going to be happening all over the planet at all kinds of scales. And as all this data, a lot of this data is going to start to get ingested into these virtual worlds that we're creating. What do you see the land surveyor's role in all that?
You held up your phone, I think. The lights are very bright, and I can't see too well back there. I'll tell you, as a surveyor, I have used Google Maps, and I've gone out in the middle of the hills looking for a boundary corner, and I've used my phone to find initial points to start from. So I'm already using it that way. I'm going to take an answer from my son last night. It was funny because he was kind of jazzed about this conference, and he goes, this scanning stuff, he goes, this is definitely the future. And the backbone of our day-to-day work is still a total station. I mean, I'm mostly a construction layout surveyor, and I would never leave home without my total station. And I said, you still need a total station to lay out grids. Try to lay out a grid line with a scanner on a building construction site. He says, no, he goes, we're going to have goggles on, and we're just going to be looking through our goggles, and we're going to it's going to say, put the point right there and pound it in. I'm like, well, I'm not even thinking that way, but I love that at 19, he's already thinking that way. So where is the future going? Hey, maybe we're going to be out there with goggles driving points into, driving grid line stakes in. I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, as far as boundary is concerned, it's always going to be the price of land is not going down, as we all know. So that third aspect I talked about, the 1 through 3, where surveyor's role is always going to have that as far as an opinion on where those bounds lie. Only 2 adjoining landowners, and this differs from state to state, and a judge can make a final decision on where a boundary lies. So surveyors will constantly be working in that, and if you look throughout history, we've defended that, and that's our main role. And I think overall we've allowed other industries to come in and kind of steer into our lane with measurements, and I don't have a severe problem with that. I just want to have people make good decisions when they do that work and represent this industry as a whole. But yeah, I see with the cost, like I was talking about earlier, come down, we're going to be integrating whatever is developed and used, and then we beta test it to a point where we either, put it in the vehicle or we break it and say, now we're not going to use this technology.
I think in some ways, it's possible that in this futuristic Jetsons world that Jeff's son is thinking about, it's very possible. Maybe the surveyor's role, besides the boundary property establishment, boundary line establishment and definition and interpretation, maybe they transition into a role of some kind of quality control type of position where in the initial setup, that Jetson system that we're talking about here with goggles, it has to get established somehow. It has to get established on the ground. Where is it going to go on the ground? I think surveyors will still have a role in that. And then maybe it's a quality control type of how accurate is that? Is it in the right spot? Something like that. Maybe.
In some ways, we're seeing that in machine control, in grading.
Absolutely.
Where the surveyor would go out and set stakes for every point to control the grading. Now, occasionally, I'm called out saying, look, just give us 4 points that we can set up our GPS on, and then we're never called again. So we've been sort of removed from that role in some projects. So that could be
we've been on projects in the same way. The big dirt moving equipment loads the DTM model into a machine control system, and they just drive around and that machine does all the grading for them. They know exactly where they are at all times. But at the end, say on a residential subdivision or something, when they're done grading, we still get called back in to verify the pads.
Yeah.
So they want a certification. They want my stamp and my signature on a letter that says, hey, that grading contractor graded everything to within substantial conformance to the approved grading plan.
I think the moral of the story is that we have to evolve with the technology, right? That's our role will change. Aaron hit on it before that there's more surveyors retiring and dying that are coming into the profession. So technology is a way that we can bridge the gap in qualified staff, and also we have to morph and develop and provide value to our clients. And that's what we have to continue to do. And we've all seen that in our careers. Mm-hmm. I came out of college in the mid-90s, so really on the kind of front edge of the kind of the computer and automation. And that really was kind of an accelerated path for me. But it's just, it's going exponential, right?
Yeah. And I'll throw out there, because you talk about the phone specifically, and I think a lot of people saw the webinars that we put on where we were using the iPhone to try scanning an office space and a car and all these different elements and then compare to terrestrial data. And I think what's important is just everybody working together to understand, why is the survey control the most accurate? How does it incorporate to confirm the accuracy of the terrestrial? And as we get into smaller units, the phone, how do we confirm that the phone is then as accurate as the terrestrial? Understanding the accuracies, but then it's also the use case, right? Something I talked about on those webinars, which if anybody wants to watch them, they're recorded on our website. It's really talking about the fact that all of these tools are another tool in the toolbox. I explained, and I got this from somebody else, but it was like all these tools are a different writing utensil, right? You've got a highlighter, you've got a pencil, you've got a permanent marker. They all can write something on a piece of paper, but you don't want to use the permanent marker on the whiteboard because you're going to have a hard time getting it off, and you don't want to use the pencil to, put the value on the check you're giving someone, because they can erase it and put something else in. So I think when we look at all the technologies, we look at the phones, how are those going to improve? What are they going to be used for? The terrestrial scanners, the mobile scanners. It's understanding them all well enough to know where they fit and how they can be utilized. One of the things I think is awesome about the phone is the fact that it's always in your pocket, right? So I don't always have a scanner in my pocket, but if you're at a scene and there's an accident and you want to pull it out and map something to have some visual context. Or something we talked about was maybe we terrestrial scanned a building, but we missed a room that was locked. What if the contractors have iPhones and we can say, hey, that room was locked. Can your maintenance guy go over, use the phone and scan that room and just send us that file? We'll tie it in with our data. Is it good enough to start piecemealing? And I think it is, and it's going to continue to expand there. So that idea of the future and the technology really melding with the survey and the accuracies and the use cases, I think it's going to be there. Survey's always going to be there for the layout and those things, but I think those are definitely going to be a part of it.
The gentleman before me makes me think that there is a position to be the lawyers of the positioning world. Do you feel that might be going that direction?
Can
I
you
didn't
get
hear
a
the
little
question.
closer?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Couldn't I hear you?
The gentleman before me, as a lawyer and a surveyor, to me, makes me think that you could be the future lawyers of the positioning world. Is that kind of the role that you see happening, or is it going somewhere?
Yeah, you know what? Surveyors used to be back in the 1800s. I mean, the surveyors were like in the different communities in the United States. The surveyors were almost like that. I mean, they were like the guys that told everybody everything about land and about property. I mean, so I don't know. I don't know if it'll go back that direction or not, but.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
appreciate the question, and I think we do have several people. I couldn't tell how many, so if we can, we'll hit a few of these questions.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Ben Chinnaberry, I'm a land surveyor in Kentucky. And back over 10 years ago, we bought our first scanner and bought the hardware, and the software was free with the expectation that the software was going to propagate and we would have updates for free. Seems like now, and I think he hit on it a little bit, but the software and the revenue generation that the vendors are, putting out updates, but the software is costing more sometimes now than the hardware. Can you talk to the effect on small business and how much money is going into the cost of using? And then, however, you all are you rolling in the cost of your software and hardware to the project, or are you just handling it as an overhead expense for your business?
I'll take a stab at that to start with. Yesterday I heard a lot of the term collection and consumption. And I think, what you're talking about there is the consumption end, which is certainly one of my challenges. I think I speak collectively here, that the hardware part is relatively easy to use and collect the data. We're all sort of struggling with how to produce an economic deliverable for our client. I started with the scanning technology, made my initial investment about 6 or 7 years ago, and it's paid for itself. It hasn't paid, it's not my bread and butter, it's not my daily tool. It's more of an investment toward the future. I have reserved the technology typically for higher end jobs and clients. It's frequently a go-to tool for forensic surveys or surveys where there's an insurance company picking up the tab and they're not really asking the how much question. They just want the best data. They want something that's a powerful exhibit to give to a jury or so I'm more selective about it. Now I'd love it to be more of a day-to-day tool. So I guess to answer your question is I'm paying for it with higher end jobs because I know that while we can collect the data quickly, it's the back end, it's the processing of the data and the deliverable that's taking us a ton of man hours. And so part of the reason I'm here at this conference is I'm excited, I want to see what's happening on the consumption end and on the data processing end. And I'm looking for that easy button that, I can dump the point cloud and we can register the point cloud and I can hit the button and then, a few minutes later out pops this beautiful map. We're a long ways from that is what I'm gathering, but they're working. I know these technology guys and the software developers, it seems like they're working feverishly to try to, they're hearing us and they're trying to do it, but it's got to be incredibly difficult to try to do what I'm asking it to do.
Yeah.
Do you seem, and just kind of a follow-up on that, do you have a higher laser scanning rate for those jobs, or are you just rolling it into a little bit higher lump sum?
Higher lump sum, probably.
I don't think it's...
let's just do one more answer. I want to get through questions as well. Thank you.
I don't think there's any secret that the hardware companies and software companies have figured out the money is in the software, really in the subscription services, right? So that cost has gone up quite a bit for all of us. The good news is that most of them are going to some kind of a use model, so then you can kind of scale it depending on when you need it. That can help, right? But I can tell for us, we basically have to roll that cost into, it's just the cost of doing business, right? So it does have an impact, clearly.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the next question.
Hi, it's Ivy Frank from DPR. I do reality capture, and you guys had mentioned that the number of surveyors every year is essentially plummeting compared to what you were used to. What are you guys doing to help change that or make it? You guys said that surveying's not necessarily as sexy, and as someone who does reality capture, I do think reality capture looks a lot cooler to a visual eye. So what are some steps you guys are taking to kind of fix that issue? Because we're going to need it more and more every day.
Anybody out there interested in becoming a surveyor professional, come see me over at the Nexus booth.
I think everybody's hiring, right?
It's a serious problem right now all over. Every company I know personally in California in our area is trying to hire people.
So to answer the question, how are we bringing people into the survey industry?
I have two boys.
Yeah.
My wife and I had two kids. There we go.
I have a son as well. We are now doing presentations at technological schools. We have one set up at the end of the month. We are reaching out. In fact, we may even attend one in Goodland, Texas. They have a 2-year tech program in Northwest Texas, Kansas. And we're even thinking about presenting to high school students. We're trying to gain this notoriety. When I first got into surveying, I never knew what it was, right? My father was a contractor, so boom, I started building things at a young age. And then I realized when I got out of college that I was really good at laying out bridges, abutments, piers, 10th points on girders. And so because of that background I had in construction, I was invaluable to this industry and layout. Now I've got away from it because it allows you to lose sleep at night when you're laying out such expensive infrastructure. But I think we just need to educate at a younger age and show younger people what's out there for professions, what's out there for their future in the job market.
That's a fantastic question, though, and unfortunately, as a profession, we have dropped the ball on education about the industry, about the profession, and it's our fault as a profession that it hasn't happened, and so it's something that really needs to be addressed. Because in California, we're going to be in serious trouble.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I have a quick answer to that question specifically. Is about 10 or 15 years ago, I was part of an advisory board at College of the Canyons in Santa Clarita, and they actually have a 2-year associate's degree for people that are interested in becoming a land surveyor. My son is part of that program, and they have this year integrated with New Mexico State, and he's going to be able to stay in-state, pay in-state tuition, and achieve a 4-year degree. So, there are tools. If you're interested, you can search it out and find a community college that offers that.
Yeah, to answer your question directly, surveyors of the future aren't going to look like us, right? Women, minorities. We really need to, look big picture about where we can draw more people from. We spend, like I tell you, with our business, and a lot of these guys are saying the same thing. I think most of our philanthropic efforts are around training and education. The junior colleges, the colleges, We're doing international recruiting as well, trying to find out where we're going to bring these people into the profession. I think that's the solution.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it is also the technology. I mean, I think surveyors who don't adopt and improve and bring in these technologies are probably going to end up not growing or maybe not being a business at some point. So I think the important thing is what we've talked about, the melding of the two. And one thing I love is that we, as a survey company, starting to have the surveyors not only run total stations, not only run GPS, but actually use the newer technologies. They enjoy them. The drones are fun. The data's visual. So I think it's incorporating those things. And I think we got one more question.
Hey guys, I'm Ethan Voorhees. I'm Jeff's son up there, and it's not too often I get to put my dad in the hot seat, so here we go.
Aren't we done? Is it time up?
We got plenty of time, man.
All right, go ahead. Last question.
But my question would be, as an upcoming surveyor myself, what's the most important piece of advice each of you have learned throughout your years in the profession that you would want to relay onto the next generation?
Read some books. Read a lot of older Browns, Waddles. There's a couple of them that are losing, but know your history, is I think that's really important in surveying, and obviously with recent times history has come up again and again. But I think overall it helps everybody to understand the past so we can move forward in the future. And I hate to see some of these old techniques that we've used forever die out because we're not practicing them anymore, or we don't know them anymore. I mean, if you look at the history of the U.S. and you look at the Mount Rushmore, 3 of those faces up there were surveyors, right? So it was property rights are still big. The majority of wealth ever created in this country was the ownership of land and the rights that go with that land, whether it's mineral or forest. These kind of things are still going to take place, and still wealth and jobs are going to be created by the ownership and the rights that go with those properties.
Just for time's sake, if we can do a couple short answers, I do want to fit in the last question that I missed. So,
yeah. I think my one bit of advice is, bad news ain't like wine; it doesn't get better with time. So if you're a young professional and you see something that's wrong, speak up, take action, and always learn.
Yeah, I would say stay humble and know what you don't know. Okay, if you don't know, you know you don't know. And it's okay to know that you don't know. You don't have have to have the answer to everything. And don't, I've seen guys try to act like they're an expert in a certain area of the survey world, and it's so vast. There's so many different aspects that every one of us up here are probably really good at 1 or 2 aspects of the world of surveying, and the rest of it we've never touched. Awesome. So stay humble and just understand and know that you don't have to know everything.
Jeff, last one.
Listen to your elders.
All right.
He gets to hear from me all the time.
Okay, you can answer him later too. All right, last question.
So I may or may not be a plant, but you guys are talking survey. You've been around for years. You've all run businesses and large projects, but you've never done it on your own. So can you kind of help everybody understand your network on the other side of surveyors? Surveying is a very small community. Who do you call and who is your go-to for answering questions?
Well, honey, you are.
I have. All my entire career, I've had a couple of different people, and that goes to the young man's question too. Use the wisdom of those around you that have gone before you in the profession. There's a vast amount of knowledge in those. As she just said, she called us old very nicely.
Yeah. She said you've been around or something.
It was very nice, but she called us old. So use the wisdom of those guys that are older and have been around. It's really important to have somebody. You've got your dad, so but he's not the only one. Use others. Find some other older guys I've talked to Shannon a number of times about things. So use the people around you.
So, surveying has a deep history, and there's a phrase that all surveyors know called following in the footsteps, and so we really depend greatly on those who went before us. I've had the blessing of my father. He's the other Voorhees in the company name. He's 83 years old now, and he's in the office every day. He sits by my side. He's not out pounding stakes anymore or climbing hills, but he's been an invaluable resource for my entire life, and he continues to be. So that's wonderful. Sometimes when I have some questions, which I do, I mean, I still have challenges, and I don't know everything. I know a lot about it, but I will reach out to other peers. I have done that, to just call up other people that I respect in my local community, a lot of them who I have great respect for, and say, hey, what would you do? Speaking to, I think we had the attorney here, one of the questions is, what would a reasonable surveyor do? So oftentimes, there may be other answers, but I have to think through, am I doing the proper standard of care? Am I doing what another reasonable, have I gone to enough effort and research to what another surveyor would do? And sometimes it means calling up another surveyor and say, hey, what do you think about this?
Yep.
You know, how's my thinking?
Yeah, and I just for time's sake, we're going to end there, but I feel like that answer also leads to what I said yesterday, is it's collaboration over competition. If you're getting into scanning, if you're getting into processing data, modeling, surveying, it's being open to talk to other people, because you don't know everything. I don't know everything. They don't know everything. They might call me about some scanning questions. I might ask them how we're going to incorporate the survey control. So being open to that collaboration as you move forward is important. And thank you guys very much for being with us today.